All right. Hey, Jessica, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Jessica?
We try to keep things simple here. We have a lot on our plate, so we're just going for name consistency. Um, I'm doing good. I am exhausted. Um, One of my problems is when I dive into a project like this, is I just gun it.
Mhm.
Um, Partly because it's so much fun, but afterwards I will crash. So
Yep.
I'm still drinking coffee at whatever time in the afternoon. There you go. Um,
Yep.
So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah.
Jessica is a marketing guru, content guru, has a consulting business, and actually helps out our company a ton. You want to just talk a little bit about your sweet spot?
Yeah, my sweet spot is organic content marketing. So I don't do anything paid. But before I started my own business, I think it was 6 jobs in 7 years. So, I mean, I wasn't bouncing around for the fun of it. I was very intentionally sort of moving up the career ladder. But because of that, I've been able to really master a lot of the organic content marketing side of things. So I do content marketing consulting for businesses that want someone either to help them with strategy or to like physically execute what needs to be done. And then I also do coaching. And that's usually for people who would like to take the reins themselves, but they aren't sure how to get started or how to put a strategy in place. So I sort of teach them the way that I do it, and then they take it from there. So it's anything from blog strategy, content strategy to community management, social media management, email marketing.
That's
Yeah.
that's that's awesome, especially even the community management. I think we'll find more and more people drawn into the communities. It seems like a no-brainer to me because we were talking earlier about working remotely, but with so many other people working remotely and not having the inner office community, looking for other ways. That's interesting.
Yep, absolutely. And everyone should already, businesses, if you're online, you should always be cultivating a community, but people are looking for that connection now more than ever. So if you haven't been, now is the perfect time to put your voice out there, put your authentic pants on and just go be you and talk and share your voice because people are very much listening right now.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm going to dive in and grill you to death, so that folks can kind of hear your thoughts around content. And I love how you approach it because it really is customer centric, which is very important to me.
Mhm.
And just want to delve into that. And in the context of where we are today, understanding that we're in this COVID pandemic, so many people work slash trap at home. So we don't want to neglect that context. So I'm just going to start with why is customer centric content so important?
Yeah, because I mean, at the end of the day, why are you writing it? To bring in customers. And so making sure that your content is speaking the language of the customer, is based on what you know your customer wants to hear, what they want to know, and that it's going to actually provide value to them. I mean, if you're not doing that, then you're just wasting your time. Like, I hate to say it.
Mhm.
So creating the content that you know is going to attract, retain, and interest to those customers is bottom of the barrel foundational element to any content strategy.
It's interesting that you say that because being in the customer experience world, I find we're actually some of the biggest offenders of that, in that we're sharing a message and we're talking about journey maps and personas and all these other terms when we're talking to customers, and yet they're like, they care
Yeah.
about revenue, profit, keeping their customers, but all the simple terms. So I like that you really focus on that because it sounds so obvious until you're in your own business, and then all that jargon creeps in.
Yes, the jargon, exactly. And it's so easy to do just to do. I think that's what I see the most is people are just creating content just purely to do so, rather than saying, is this appealing to the person we actually want it to appeal to, whether we're using the right jargon or we're talking about the right topics. Is this in fact achieving the very initial first rung sort of goal of attracting the people who we want to bring on as customers?
It seems like right now in this moment in time that people who develop content would have had to rethink what their content plan was and what people wanted to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's not even like I've actually done a few workshops on sort of like how to rework your content marketing during COVID, how to rework your social media during COVID. And you can still be, what I want to tell brands is you need to have your content be relevant to right now, but not every single thing you put out there needs to be COVID related.
Yeah.
People are going to get sick of hearing that. I mean, are we in week 3, I think, for most people of like major quarantine? Like, you're going to start to sound tone deaf if you're overdoing it. So finding that balance between sharing what is valuable. So maybe that's not like news clips about COVID. Maybe that's tips for working productively from home, or how to improve your leadership during times of challenge or crisis. But then other pieces like, how to create a customer experience strategy, that's going to be just as valuable now as it is any other time. So sort of finding that balance and knowing how to speak that language, knowing your place in the conversation. That's what I've been saying a lot. What's your place in the conversation? And then how do you need to tweak your content, whether that's your social media post or your blog post, to reflect sort of you being a relevant voice in the conversation?
Yeah, I think for my content, really, I just tried to look at what was scheduled and say, okay, in the context, is this offensive, tone deaf? And kind of bounce it that way, because I do want to share things that aren't necessarily about COVID front on, but at the same time, just kind of bouncing it off to say, does it still sound okay or completely insensitive, which would not be my intent at all.
Yeah.
So I like the thought of not everything has to be about the new stats for COVID, which we get desensitized, and we can't afford to get desensitized.
Absolutely. And there's so many other things we can be talking about that could be indirectly related to that are still valuable. So finding that balance for sure.
Yeah, that's key. So in terms of SEO and other marketing benefits, are there other benefits to creating customer-centric content?
Yes, definitely. In terms of SEO, I mean, to create customer-centric content, there are a number of things that you want to look at. One of which is what questions are your customers asking, what topics come up most often, and then how can your content address that? You also want to look at competitors. What are competitors talking about? How are your competitors speaking to your potential customers that you can be replicating with your own unique brand, touch, style of voice? And then the third piece is the SEO piece. So taking those topics, what are your customers wanting to learn about, and then finding the keywords. So like you said, maybe your customers aren't searching customer journey mapping because they don't know that word, maybe they're searching something related to that. And so the SEO benefit is that when you find that keyword, you're really truly now writing for the customer, because you're writing in their own words. You're finding the phrases that they're literally using to search for those topics. And then in turn, by creating that content, assuming that it's good, high quality content, you're going to start ranking for those terms. And so now you're attracting the customers to your website because you've done the sort of the important SEO work behind knowing what your customers want to read about. And it just gives you, I think the other marketing benefit is it gives you really great content for sharing, for showing that you're listening to your customers, for filling out your email newsletters in a way that really provides value, for pushing content on social media that shows that you know what you're talking about, you know what they care about, and it's something that those potential customers are going to be interested in. So when you look at the holistic view, you're attracting and driving interest and showing your value and being an authority in your space. And it's customer-centric content is where it's at. If you're creating content, you've got to be focused on that.
So I've gotten a bunch of surveys lately, and I have a whole soapbox for that I will leave, not for here. It sounds like, is there a way to use the research around what people are searching for to learn more about consumers in general, not necessarily specific to our exact market and what they're searching for, what's important to them right now, because we couldn't have done a ton of advanced research because it's a unique moment in time?
Yeah, you could look at Google Trends. That's a really good tool for figuring out what's popular now. And it's interesting to watch what was popular and what's now recently spiked. And I'm sure Google has some reports out there. There's a lot of like the keyword research tools, like SEMrush and Ahrefs. They often put out those trends. And you can also see keyword trends within those tools as well. So I use Ahrefs, for example. You pay a monthly fee to access it, but then you can see the popularity of the phrase, and you could sort of like dig through various specific keywords and find which ones seem to be most popular right now. So absolutely, that data is very, very available.
That's interesting. Yeah, the Google Trends. This is a little bit of a tangent, but did you see the article that Walmart put out about they looked at their data and what had been selling in the top 10 and what's now selling in the top 10?
No, I'm interested though.
So it's a drastic increase in the number of tops that people are buying, not bottoms. Yeah, they're speculating it's because of work from home. I'm like, didn't people have tops before this, before they were working from home? I don't totally understand it, but data and insights that can
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. And I mean, that's a cool thing too, though, is the idea of taking your data, your proprietary data, and turning it into something that is relevant to the general public and ideally to your customers.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of data. Not the culling of it, that I need smarter people than that. Smarter people than me for that, but I do love data. So the next question I want to ask you is, what types of questions should business owners, marketers, and leaders be asking right now?
Yeah, I have 5. I basically, in really thinking about this topic and working with my clients on this topic, I've come up with sort of 5 general questions that I think we can pick through right now that I think will be helpful. So for the first is, do you have a clear customer in mind for this piece of content? And that's critical because you may have customers in different segments that fall into different areas. So if you've done your work, you have your personas or some version of a persona. And as you guys say in the CX world, you have your customer chair. Is the customer in that chair interested in this piece of content? So getting specific, it could be multiple of your personas, it could be just one, but having a clear picture in your mind of who you're writing for is going to ensure that the content really lands. So that would be my number one tip, or my number one question for you to start with.
No, I love that, because even putting this summit on and talking to potential speakers like you, and folks said, well, who's the audience going to be? And my comment was, the audience, it's really focused on, well, SMBs, so small to mid-sized businesses, but the leaders, the business owners who have the weight of the world on their shoulders right now. So they're the ones who are looking at cash flow, looking at profitability, looking at being able to maintain their current levels of staff and all of those pieces, and making sure that we're hyper focused in on them. Otherwise, our conversation could get a lot more into the marketing nitty-gritties that someone who's actually doing it might be interested in, as opposed to business owners and business leaders who need to have an understanding of the why and these types of questions. So that's super helpful. You mentioned 5 questions.
Yeah.
So I don't want to derail you, so I think we have 4 more.
Well, I figure we can go into each question because they're each sort of their own piece. And so which part of the funnel is this content serving? Is it right for that person within the funnel? So if we're looking at content in terms of funnel, we see top of the funnel is the awareness stage. Is the content solving a problem? This content should be educational, blog post, infographic, maybe a general how-to video. Versus middle of the funnel, that's going to be more about customers in the evaluation stage. So they're considering maybe a product or a service like yours. So the goal with this content is not just to educate or just to provide value. It's to then drive that customer to being a lead. Because you know that if they're searching for, let's say, the difference between MailChimp and MailerLite, and your MailerLite, you have a good idea that they're coming to you with the intention of potentially converting.
Yep.
And then bottom of the funnel, which is the actual conversion element. That's sort of what I just mentioned, actually, like a comparison, but case studies fall into the content for bottom of the funnel, webinars, helping your readers make an informed decision and ideally making that decision to convert with you. So knowing those different areas of the funnel, and they may be a little bit different depending on your industry, your audience, your business model, but having some sort of clear differentiation between where each piece of content fits and how it's actually adding value. Do you have the clear customer in mind, and now you know where they are in the funnel? So that would be question number 2.
In terms of customer success content, making sure that, they are able to adopt the product or service, get the value out of it. I mean, off the top of my head, it seems like, okay, that's after they buy. Is there a place for that before the sale as well? I mean, potentially, understand we're painting with broad brush strokes.
Definitely. I mean, that's like your FAQ content, I think, in general, just so they can start to understand how your product or service works. But if we think of content on a really broad spectrum, because so much can fall into the category of content, that's definitely your testimonials, your reviews, and all of that has a part in your content, sort of overall content plan. So that's definitely important. And number 5, we'll just bring up right now, because that sort of addresses the post-sale content.
Okay.
So you have those 3 areas of the funnel, but once they're through the funnel and now they're a customer, is your content still providing value to them? So is it serving them in terms of maybe content like product-related content that tells them how to use it, how to use different features of your tools? Are you creating blog posts, or do you have like, Salesforce is known for their massive vault, I guess you could say, of content related to their product. And I mean, to the extent that if you're new to Salesforce and you've just signed on with a contract with them, like they literally have someone that walks you through this. That's how extensive their content is. Which can be overwhelming, but it's really valuable. Think of the value that adds to the people using their tools and products, because now they're going to get the most out of it because they've created this very specific content. And also educational content for those customers, content that is going to provide value outside of your business. So things that that they care about, that they're trying to figure out, how can you help them figure that out? So maybe just general sort of business things, business questions or issues, things related within your industry, obviously. You want to stay relevant to your brand. So that would be sort of that like new funnel where the customer now just sort of exists there for you and you want to continue providing value.
Oh, I love that you're not harping on it, but reinforcing the adding value, because a lot of people know I have a paranoia around sending out multiple emails to prospects or customers, like, the 3 or 5 in a row that you're supposed to send out. And I'm like, I can't do it unless each one is distinctly adding value to the person getting it. Because I'm probably the classic unsubscribe. I unsubscribe from everything because but I also have a very clean inbox. So I love that you're really talking about making sure, are you still adding value, especially post-sale? I think that's huge.
Yeah, and quickly too, because I had someone mention this on another workshop I did, is adding value. What is adding value? So as like a quick definition, adding value is helping them solve a problem, making their life easier, in general, being of service to the person who's reading that content. You're checking a box for them, something that they're looking for. I think that's the easiest way to think about it.
No, I think that's great. And I think it's so important, even kind of when we're looking back at what we've done, is what did we add the value that we planned with whatever the content, the piece, the collateral is, and is there more value that we could be adding?
Yep.
I love that.
Yeah. So then I suppose we can move to number 3, which is now number 4. Is the content adding value? Oh my gosh. This is what we're just talking about. How perfect. Is the content adding value to the potential customer's life? So as we look at that, I suppose we can just touch on this one more time before we hit on the last question, which is also content that adds value is not overly promotional. Depending on where you are in the funnel, you can be a bit promotional, more on the conversion end, the middle and top of the bottom of the funnel.
Yep.
But even like a case study can be very value forward. It can be less about me and more about, this is a story you want to read. This is interesting. This data is going to illuminate something for you. It's also content that's thorough. So many people, I see so many businesses creating blog posts that are 300 words long. And it's like, just don't do it. It's just a waste. You know, Google's not going to see the value in that. And you're likely not really fully answering a question or providing a resource or a solution. So it's not going to be valuable to the person reading the content. So is it thorough? And finally, do you provide further reading or resources for the customer? So that could be another related case study. That could be linking to an authority within your industry that has broken down some particular data or something. So when you're looking at whether your content is adding value, those are 3 areas I really like to consider. So not overly promotional, thorough, and providing sort of extra resources to help that reader dive further into the topic if they'd like.
Yeah, there's several people that on LinkedIn I follow. One of them I actually interviewed for this series, and his content is always so valuable, so much so that evidently I interact with it so much that when I was like, hey, will you speak on my summit? He's like, we know each other, right? And I'm like, I don't think we've ever met in person. I'm not totally sure whether we have, but we feel like we know each other. But it's because all of his content, his newsletter, his podcast, it's Shep Hyken. For those of you would have heard him last week. His content is just incredible. It's not fluff pieces selling him, although when you follow him, then you want to engage with him. So I think that's huge. A question I had is, in a content strategy, is there a place for curating content that you haven't created that are from other sources?
In service of sharing or of integrating that in your content, or?
Either.
Yeah, I mean, you can just I keep a doc, like just like a spreadsheet. There's also tools like Pocket where you can save content. And so just sort of choose whatever tool you want. I'm trying to think, I know there's another one that I've used for saving content. But yeah, it's just a matter of putting it to the side and remembering it's there. So maybe when you go to create your content strategy or you go to schedule social media, you automatically open a tab with sort of that list of content in it. So you can go back in and refer back to what it is that you like. There's also, I just discovered on LinkedIn, a save for later. When you're looking at a post, the top 3 dots. And then you can access that. And that's great. If you're a heavy LinkedIn user and that's a place where you find your content a lot, go ahead and save it. And then you can always just pop back in there and see the content that you want to bring into yours or use as inspiration or whatever.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Yeah. So I suppose we can jump into the last question.
Yeah,
you ready?
Go for it. Yeah.
So why are we creating this content? So we know you want to be talking to a specific customer. We know you want to be providing value. But are you creating it just because a competitor did? You know, when you're thinking of the customer, you have to ask yourself, what is our why for putting the time into this? And then thus, what is the customer going to get out of it because of that? So when I'm looking at why I'm creating this content, I'm looking at, is it solving a problem that we know customers frequently have? Because we see that they look at these FAQ pages most commonly, or they ask our sales reps that. Are we creating it because we've got feedback that this particular feature is very difficult to use? And so we're going to build out a piece about this feature. So looking at those pieces and making sure that when you're putting content out there, whether it's through social media or your blog or a case study, that you have a very clear why. So just like anything you would put budget behind, I mean, you're putting time and resources behind this. So why are you doing it? What do you hope to get out of it? What's going to be the end value for you as the business, not just as the customer? So having that puzzle piece in place, I feel like sort of puts everything together of who we're writing it for, why we're writing it, you know, what value do we get and what value does the customer get?
So I'm going to throw a loop in, a question for you. How would you, in relation to content, how do you measure ROI, or what do you look at to determine that what you're putting out there is successful?
So there's a lot of things to look at, a lot of metrics. There are sales metrics, of course, and there are non-sales metrics. So one of the best metrics I think to track is organic traffic, because if you're doing it right and you're creating SEO-based content, you're going to see that organic traffic number go up. You want to see that go up because that means you're ranking more in the top 10 pages, in the top 10 rankings, you know, the first page, I should say, of Google. And the more you're ranking, the more you're just going to be getting people coming to your site. So like the way I look at it is you have to do less pushing and you get more, and you're still getting people come to you. So that's a really critical metric. And then you can track sales leads through Google Analytics or through whatever your analytics platform is of choice, just by seeing, okay, they started here, they made their way here. It's harder to draw that conclusion sometimes, which is why a lot of businesses don't like to invest in organic. But that's also as simple as asking while you're on a sales call, how did you hear about us? Or, you know, how did you come into contact with our brand? Or sending, you know, a post-sales survey and just starting to collect some of that data so you get an understanding. But you can definitely in Google Analytics watch the flow. And so other metrics are, you know, downloads. Are you driving downloads to your, you know, on-demand products or subscriber driving products? Page views, bounce rate. Are people coming to your site and really taking it in, or are they leaving? That's going to determine sort of the customer centricity piece of things as well. So you can definitely tie it to money, and you can tie it to some those other sort of important metrics, I think, but that maybe are less quantifiable in terms of finances.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's similar to customer experience where, you know, sometimes making the case requires a few linkages that you have to have a longer attention span with your audience to say, okay, this is how we came to this conclusion. Still completely valid. The math is valid. It's just, you have to be able to help people get there. It's not just A plus B is.
Right. Something I did too, which is like very hacky, but I just took, when I was working for a company a few years ago, they really charged me with what's the ROI? What does it cost you to do this, and what are we making? And so I literally took like an hourly rate, multiplied it by the amount of time it took me to do X, and then compared that to the money that we're getting, like, you know, our customer value data point, whatever it is that they had for me to use. And that's a bit hacky, but it still gave us a really clear idea. Like, we were seeing the leads we were driving through the blog were much more valuable than leads we were getting through Facebook that we were paying for, in terms of cost per acquisition. So that's another way to do it if you don't really have the best tools in place, because sometimes it does get a little tricky tracking when they land on your page and then go somewhere else. And then, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So taking sort of the back end approach can sometimes be helpful too.
It's interesting because just in the context of LinkedIn, I have realized over time that there are people and companies that I follow and that I'm really drawn to. And I think that they must be thought leaders because their content's incredible. They're in my feed. I like it a lot. And I'm like, I wonder if I came, you know, up from my little world of LinkedIn, who else is out there? But they're not producing content that connects and makes me think they're super smart and can do whatever it is. So they really fall off my radar. And, you know, I just live in the bubble of the companies and people that are producing it. And so that's kind of how I determine who must be amazing in the market. And I'm sure there's got to be other people like me.
Well, there's, of course, I can't remember the exact stat right now, but it's something like 72% of decision makers rate thought leadership content as being important in making a decision for the company, like a purchasing decision. So there's absolutely value in that. Which is why when I talk about organic content marketing, it's hard for people to understand the value. But when you look at the SEO value of driving traffic and you look at the potential value, a lot of it feels hard to reach, but it's there. I've seen it work for dozens of companies. And I know lots of people watching this probably have a great organic content strategy in place and they're seeing a lot of value from it. So you got to do the upfront work, but you're proof that it works, because that's what you use as a barometer for, who's successful and who you want to connect with. So
yeah, it really is. I know I threw out Shep's name, but Annette Franz, who will be on in, I can't remember if it's next week or in 2 weeks. I'll be interviewing her, and her blog is it may actually be it is one of the best I've ever read. I talked to her about it once. I'm like, how do you write this stuff? And she's like, I love to write. I'm like, okay, I won't be envious, but I kind of am. But no, I get that. Anything I haven't asked you, I know we're going to provide information on how they can connect with you further if they have questions, but anything I didn't ask you or that has cropped into your mind that we want to make sure people think about?
No, I think just keeping these high level questions in mind. And even if you're not the person doing this work, it's sort of like your check-in, like, are they doing what we know needs to happen on a very high level? So you don't necessarily have to get in the weeds with these things, but using these as your check-in with your, I think is really valuable.
I think that's huge. And so I know if people want to learn more about what you do specifically and how to engage with you, you have contact information, and you have something that people can use to get to your website, download something. I think it's the afternoon. I haven't had siesta.
No worries. Yes. So you can find me on my website, jessicathiefels.com. If you search my name, I'm the only person you will find, because I'm the only person with the name Jessica Thiefels, which is great for SEO. Super convenient. I have a particular freebie I want to share with y'all, which is my content marketing competitor analysis. So it's a template and a checklist. I wanted to share it because we're talking a lot about the customer, and part of figuring out what your customer wants to read is knowing what your competitors are doing and sort of assessing how valuable that is, and then seeing how you can morph that into your version, your brand's version of what's working for them. So anyway, I have just a little freebie if you want some help on doing that sort of content specific competitor analysis. And that's on my website at jessicathiefels.com/resources. And I think, Jess, you'll be sharing it as well. So
yeah, we'll add it on a slide to the end of this. And I just remembered, I do have to share actually how I met you, because it is proof that content strategy works. When I was looking for someone to help me in this area of my business, much like I do when I can't sleep in the middle of the night, I Google things, and I Googled for a long time. And I was looking at, people who, I think they just invented their business overnight, and they were charging like, $30 a month to do 1,000 things. I'm like, okay, that's probably not what I want. And then I found others where it was like $30,000 a month. And I'm like, I've got a good business, but I'm probably not there yet. And just, me and Google. And then I came across your content actually and started, skimming through it. And then I found your website, and then I reached out to you, but that's literally why. Otherwise, I don't know that our circles would have necessarily ever crossed.
Yeah, definitely.
Might have a year ago when you were out in San Diego, but now that you're back to being an East Coaster. So
yeah, I love that. I have clients tell me all the time that they weren't sure, and they read my content, and they knew it would be a good fit. And that's not to toot my own horn and say I'm a good writer. It's just to say that content is valuable because you're showing what you know and your expertise up front without asking for anything, or even having to get on a phone call with anyone.
And content, kind of like this summit, it's really more like a matchmaker. Well, this is more like a matchmaker service. You don't have to be an amazing writer. Does it connect with the people who would work well with you and who need what you're doing? And if you can convey that, that's what really matters. If somebody's connecting with everybody in the way that they're producing content, I don't know that that's one. It's not, I can't imagine it's possible, but it's when you're just being authentically you and providing information about what you uniquely do, how you serve and add value.
Yeah, exactly. Being very specific to your expertise, and bringing in data maybe that you have from your clients and customers. But that's how you separate yourself from the rest. Absolutely. What do you do absolutely best, and how do you put that into content form?
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I really appreciate it. And I know that people are going to appreciate hearing more about a customer-centric content strategy, especially in this time where some people may have extra bandwidth to invest in creating quality content, and others are just thinking of, how do I keep my head above water? But then they can noodle on this later. So I appreciate your time. I know it's valuable and that you've been on lots of Zoom interviews, workshops, and whatnot. Thank you so, so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to connecting with everyone somewhere else, social media.